down that camera and strap in. It's time for a new episode of TogChat Live. It's an open mic night for photographers. Get ready for 60 minutes of your photography questions in real time with answers from your host, Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, that's me. How are y'all doing? It is Wednesday night. It's a week later. We're going to try episode 107 from scratch. So it's time for TogChat. I'm your host, Joe Edelman. We're going to be here for the next hour, and we're going to be talking photography. So first of all, I have to apologize to everyone because obviously if you were here last week, you know that it was an audio disaster and just about had another audio disaster today. So I have put all the interview stuff on hold. I have been on the phone for most of the afternoon with the folks from Wirecast who produce this software and found out that I very diligently updated to their newest version, and it created a whole bunch of problems with the audio gear that I am using and needed to retool some things. So that being said, I'm not going to be talking with Photo Joseph tonight, and I know a lot of you have asked, am I still going to talk to Ken Wheeler? Of course I'm going to talk to Ken Wheeler. You can bank on that. So I am basically going to pick up with the interviews next week. I need a couple days to get everything tested and worked out. Literally, as of about an hour ago, I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to do TogChat tonight because the software was just having major issues. So at least we're here. We're going to get in our Q&A. We can spend the evening together. We can chat photography. There's a lot of people here already. Roy's here. Gord's here. Mike, James, Adamus, Sven. I saw him come in. Gerald's here. Jean-Edward, Kevin, James Lewis, Mark Lipton, Troy's here. Listen, seriously, you guys know that I really appreciate you taking the time to spend an hour or so with me on a Wednesday evening and talk photography. So the cool part is, as I explained before, we're done with the contests. We're sticking straight up with photography. The interviews are coming. In fact, I managed to get confirmation from two pretty big names in this past week. I've got those scheduled for later in the month and one in the beginning of June. So that's going to be coming up. Roderick McLeod. Did I see that Spiros used my egg? No, I didn't see that Spiros used my egg. But you know what? If he did, that's awesome because, hey, the egg is a great learning tool. So I don't own it. It's an egg, right? But cool. If he did, that's great. So listen, I've got a lot of really good questions in here already. I want to start with a few that were left over from last week that I didn't get to answer that I was going to try and answer along with Ken. So we'll get those and then I'll start working on these. If you have questions, please type them in the chat window and I'll scroll back through and look. If for some reason we're running out of time, and if you've got a question that you need to get answered, Super Chat, that little $sign down in the bottom left-hand corner of your chat window, that works. Anything from $1, I think they'll let you donate up to $500, which I'd be the first to tell you. You'd be nuts to do that. But nonetheless, any Super Chats, I will make sure that I get them answered tonight, even if I have to stay late, okay? So here we go. As far as our questions, one of the ones that was left over from last week came from Andrew. And his question was, he lives in very rural northern Wisconsin. My sympathies, Andrew, only because of the weather. It's cold, right? But there are no modeling agencies in his area. He wants to know, what other ways would you find models? Okay, so first of all, Andrew, let me explain that my Wisconsin geography is not the best, so I'm not going to pretend that it is, but I want to make sure that you know about a resource that I have available for you guys that can help you with potentially solving part of that problem. Let me switch my screen over here, and I'm going to bring up my website. When you visit my website, up on the top of every page, there's this blue link that says Resources for Models. So if you click on that link, you're going to see here Modeling Agency Directory, and if you pick a state, you can go all the way down towards the bottom, and you can pick your state of Wisconsin, and up you're going to come a list, and you can subscribe to my newsletter, but up is going to come a list of modeling agencies in Brookfield, Green Bay, Madison, Milwaukee, Oak Creek. Now, if you are close to any of those, there's their contact information. Go for it. Let me explain that one of the things that you'll run into with modeling agencies is that they want to make money, right? You're probably hoping to find some models kind of, on the cheap. So It's a matter of, are you going to be willing to pay their rate? Most modeling agencies, you're not going to be able to book a model for less than about $125 per hour with a 2-hour minimum. So I'd be the first to tell you, $250 to practice, if that's what you're doing, oof, that's a bit pricey, okay? As much as I, tell people, look, don't have gas, don't be spending crazy money on gear. $250 is a lot of money to throw into a model for a practice session, because keep in mind, you can practice with mannequins, etc. And even when you're starting to build your portfolio, $250, a lot of money. So there's a couple things that you do. So number one, let me tell you the trick that's going to get me in trouble. Modeling agencies are going to hate me for this. And to be clear, I'm not saying that I ever did this, but, if you try it out, hey, you didn't hear it from me. So a lot of modeling agencies, if you visit their website, they post pictures of all their models on the website. And frequently, just saying, I've observed that they use the model's first and last name on the website. So, somebody that was kind of enterprising and maybe, figured that, hey, they'd be willing to put in a little bit of effort, they could take that first and last name and they could type it into the search bar of, another website like Facebook or Instagram and see if that person has a profile and say, hey, I'm a photographer and I would love to photograph you and I'd be willing to give you pictures, and you kind of leave the agency out of it, right? So here's the thing. Any modeling agency that sees this, that I just said that, they're going to be really ticked at me. There will be some modeling agencies that are going to find out that I just said that, and they're literally going to go ahead and they're going to take the last name off their website just because I pointed that out. I don't care, right? It is important for agencies to make money for the sake of the models. That is the business that they are in. But at the same time, right now I'm talking to photographers and helping photographers find talent to build out their books. So that's one way that you're going to do it. Another way that you're going to do it is with a website like Model Mayhem. Now, keep in mind, it's modelmayhem.com, modelmayhem.com. So keep in mind that, Model Mayhem, it's a website, which simply means that anybody can join, anybody can say they're a model. Why? Because look, it says so right next to their name on the internet. Yeah, just like, all the photographers on Model Mayhem are professional photographers. Why? Because it says so right next to their name on the internet, and it's on the internet, so it must be true, right? So, obviously you got to use a little bit of common sense, okay? But that's a great way to start. The other thing that's worth doing, if you are willing to be a little bit more brazen, if you're willing to approach people, have some business cards printed. Don't lie. Don't make up some big fancy business name, whatever. Just put your name, etc. Hopefully you have a website or some place where you have your pictures. And if you see somebody that you think, let's say you're out to dinner and there's a waitress, you think she's beautiful. Don't be like that skeezy old guy that's, going to walk up and it's like, hey, you're like really hot and I'd really like to take your picture. That's a bad plan, right? But certainly you could compliment the young woman and say, listen, I'm a photographer and I don't want you to feel awkward about me approaching a restaurant, but here's my business card. If you would ever be interested in doing some photographs, I would be very interested in photographing you. End of conversation. And you walk away and she has the business card. If she goes and she looks at your pictures, and if she's impressed and is interested in working with you and comfortable enough to reach out, she's going to reach out. She's going to email you, call you, whatever. If she's not, it wasn't meant to be. And you just don't sweat it. So I don't do that a lot, but I have done it. I have done it with my wife. We'll be out to dinner and we'll see somebody and, I will leave a card. And literally probably less than a third of the time that I do that. And believe me, I don't do it frequently. I'm talking maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And out of those 2 or 3 times, maybe one of those people will follow up and reach out to me and say, oh my God, I would love to do a shoot with you. Cool. Done. Okay. So anyway, I hope that helps, Andrew. But those are some of the different ways that you could do it. Some of the things that you could do to, kind of get the ball rolling and try and, find you some subjects. And then of course, you can get mannequins for like 60, 70 bucks online. Adam Batchelor, running workshops is another way to shoot for free. Adam, I appreciate your support, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not gonna go too deep down that rabbit hole because I don't actually have a lot of respect for that plan. And the reason is I don't respect those kind of workshops. Okay. People don't come to take a workshop from me so that I can take pictures to build my portfolio. So that's really inappropriate in my mind. If people are coming to take a workshop from me, they want to learn. And if anything, they want to shoot. And it's because they need to, they need to be able to build their portfolio and they need to be able to gain experience. Okay. So anyway, all that being said, let's move on to the next question here. Let's see. Also from last week, James Lewis, anybody hear any new or Nikon news of the release of the new Nikon mirrorless next spring? You know what, James, there's been a whole lot of buzz on that. Not trying to sound snarky or anything, but at this point, I don't care. It's not going to impact me at all. So I realize there's a lot of Nikon users out there, but I think, more importantly, with regards to the release of the next, or I shouldn't say the next, the release of the Nikon mirrorless, we're not hearing anything that indicates you will not have to use an adapter. And that just plain sucks, period. So, that's my take on that. So let's see, another question here. This one went by because whoever did this one typed it in a little bit earlier again, and I apologize. I missed you. James Tehan, there it is. James Tehan wanted to know, could I explain a Dutch angle and if it is still in use today? Here's the thing, James, about a Dutch angle. I learned what a Dutch angle was when I was a teenager, and I was really into learning all these rules and regulations and names and labels in photography. And it's one of the names that I get a big kick out of. So a Dutch angle, folks, just for those of you that don't know what a Dutch angle is, it just means the camera's tilted. That's basically what it means. So is it still in use today? I see lots of pictures with crooked horizons, so I would argue it's very much in use today. But let's face it, those people didn't mean to use a Dutch angle. I have pretty much left that out of all my educational efforts simply because I find that's the kind of thing, once you tell somebody, hey, tilting your camera's a Dutch angle, now it's become like a rule. It's a thing. Okay, you're supposed to do this and then you call it this. No, okay? I frequently, in fact, in the very last video that I did, the yellow cellophane video, if you go watch the behind the scenes video clip, you should notice that the camera's tilted pretty aggressively in the shot, intentionally. So I had the girl leaning slightly, but I wanted the angle to be even more dramatic, so I tilted the camera in the opposite direction to make it really look like she's leaning, when in fact she's not. That's a Dutch angle, by definition, okay? But at no point did I think to myself, okay, I want to do this shot with a Dutch angle, etc. So, yeah, I mean, it's a thing. It's still there. The way that I teach about crooked horizons or just tilted shots in general, so this is kind of Joe's philosophy. A crooked horizon is wrong, hands down, if we're using the word crooked, meaning it's not level. Okay, there's no excuse for that, especially since we can, fix it in post and fix it well. But if you want to be creative and you want that horizon really crooked, then it should be very crooked, like dramatically crooked. And there should be kind of a reason for it. That diagonal line that you're creating with that horizon needs to be leading to something of importance in the shot. So I'm all for tilting the camera and tilting the camera aggressively. But that's kind of my thing. I'm kind of the belief that if you're going to tilt. Otherwise, no, things should be level. That's kind of, my approach as far as that goes. Okay. So, let's see here. What do we have next? Actually, Roy asked a question tonight, so I've got these mixed in now. We're looking at some of tonight's questions, some of last week's. Roy, are you interested in seeing other people's DIY gear? You know what? If it's good, sure. Why not, man? Okay. If you're asking me, like, can you post a link to something here in the chat window or that kind of stuff? No, it won't let you. But if you have something that you think I might be interested in, by all means, message me, email me. I'll take a look at it. I have shared other DIY pieces with people in the past that I felt was worth sharing. Flip side, and I make no bones about this, sometimes people will show me something that's DIY, and I will realize there's a better, more efficient, more practical way to do it, and then I'll go ahead and I'll turn it into my own DIY. I'm not beyond doing that, okay? But no, would I just take somebody else's and show it as my own? No, but if it's good enough, I'll share it with the people. Sure, absolutely. Troy wanted to know, do I ever get nervous or panicky before a shoot? Nah, I get nervous or panicky before I go live on YouTube and things aren't working, because, yeah, today, I'm not kidding. Today was like absolutely a nightmare. But no, Troy, not before a shoot, I don't. I mean, there have been times in my life, maybe way, way back when, that I did. I think, some stuff when it's very new, I still get nervous, but nerves, at least for me, and everybody deals with this differently. So please, folks, it's like if you don't deal with nerves the way I do, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Okay, trust me, there's a whole bunch of science behind that. Everybody handles it differently. Even when I do speaking engagements. So Friday, you guys know that I'm going to be down in Texas at Fort Worth Photo Fest in Fort Worth, Texas. I'll be doing a 2-hour workshop down there. In fact, some of our visitors that are here tonight are scheduled to come see me there, which I'm really looking forward to meeting you guys. Right before I start, for about 15 minutes prior to beginning, I'll be nervous. The people that are there, if they are able to see me for that 15 minutes or at some point during that time, I'll probably be pacing back and forth. I do that routinely. It just kind of burn off that adrenaline. But once they say my name and they say go, it's like, yeah, it's fine. When I was speaking for Olympus back in January, for the very first time that I spoke on stage at one of the big photography events, my wife could tell you that Sunday morning before I went on stage the first time, I probably called her about 8 times, and I was pretty much a head case because I was nervous, because it was important. It was a big deal. Once it started, boom, just you run with it, and it was great. And at that point, by the time I got to Las Vegas and did the same talks, I paced for a few minutes beforehand, but not terribly, nervous in that regard. It's just, it's kind of one of those things. Everybody's got a different way of dealing with it. None of them is bad. It's not bad to get nervous. I always think that it's good to get nervous in the sense that it matters. It's important, right? And you don't want to blow it. But what matters is how you process those nerves. And if you let those nerves shut you down, or if you let those nerves get in your way, ultimately, then that's a problem. So it's really more important what do you do with the nerves, as opposed to do you get nervous. But shoots at this point now, I've been shooting for more than 40 years. So in that sense, there's not a whole lot that gets me nervous when I'm actually using the camera. So let's see. Rick has a question here. Once I saw you shoot a model while draping a translucent cloth over both you and the model. Could you review some of the key points in setting that up? So what Rick's talking about is either you saw me live in Nashville or Las Vegas when I was speaking for Olympus, or you saw in the video from Las Vegas that I had the material that I put over the model. And as far as some of the key points in setting it up, Rick, believe it or not, it's so much easier than you might think. If you watch the video that I have, in fact, here, I can show you on my website, the article. Let me switch back to my homepage here. So if you go to joeedelman.com, it's the very first article that comes up right now. It's my presentation from WPPI in Las Vegas. About midway through that presentation, you'll see me do the material over my head and over the model's head and get underneath it. And basically, all the setup is I set the light before I put the model over her. The material over her. Sorry, the material does need to be kind of translucent so the light can come through. Depending on how dense the material is, understand that it's going to knock out some of the light. So if you meet her before you use the material, and let's say you're at F8, depending on how much light the material knocks off, you may have to open your lens up to like 5.6 or whatever, again, depending on how much light it takes out. And then probably the other thing that I would say in that mix is that you want to try and shoot at a wider aperture, because that is going to allow the material to start to create bokeh and get really, really soft. And it's just a matter of putting the model under there with you and making sure that the material is kind of falling on the sides but not falling in front of the model. And what I did in the video is you see the model kind of almost like she's like crawling through it type thing. So I've got the fingers and, you know, that type of stuff. There's also a shot that I posted recently on Instagram. Same idea, different model. It wasn't done, you know, on stage, but it was done in the studio, and she's kind of, you know, playing with the material. But it's really, really not that difficult. If you're using translucent material, there's not a whole lot of kind of special prep you have to do. Meter your scene, set your light where you want it so that it's flattering for your subject, and then you're good to go from there. So, okay. So let's see here. Deck luck, thank you, everybody. Thumbs up is always greatly appreciated if you could. Tim West has a question here. The question is, and some of you guys that were in here early, don't worry, I got your questions listed. We're going to go back through them. I just don't want to get too far behind on the feed here. So Tim West asked, do the manufacturers have a set filter that they apply, or are the values consistent? The reason I would like to be able to start editing my raw file with the JPEG look. Makes sense? Well, I think I understand what you're asking, Tim, but no, it doesn't make sense in one sense, all right? A JPEG is a compressed file. So basically what's happening is they're using software to essentially eliminate the things that you don't need in the shot, and they are making the decisions for you, etc. Okay? So all of that being said, is there something like a preset that you could find and like install it and boom, you have JPEG look? No. Could you make your own? Sure. Take a shot in your camera in JPEG, take the same shot in RAW, open them both up, and basically do the RAW adjustments on your RAW file until it looks exactly like your JPEG, and then go ahead and save that as a preset. But at that point, my question to you would be, then why are you going to shoot in RAW in the first place if that's what you want? So give me a little bit more feedback there, and maybe I can try and help you, you know, kind of solve some problems with that. Okay. So Xavier, did I ever try any or one of the Olympus Pro Zooms or one of the f1.8 primes? Yeah. I have the 7 to 14, the 12 to 40, the 40 to 150 Pro Zooms. I have all three of those. I have the 75 1.8, all sweet lenses. I also have the 2 of the 1.2 prime. So they have 3 1.2 lenses. They have the 17. That's the one I don't have, at least yet. I have the 25 1.2 and I have the 45 1.2. And Xavier, they're awesome. I mean, you know, let's be clear, folks, okay? You know, I've got a great relationship with Olympus. They have been incredible at welcoming me, you know, as a user. I'm not saying these things because I've made money by speaking for them, period. Switching back to Olympus, or not switching back to Olympus, but switching to Olympus is the best thing I've done for my photography in decades. And the only regret that I have, I'm not kidding, is that I didn't do it a lot sooner. It has brought the fun back to my work. It has made things easier. The sharpness on these lenses is incredible. The feature sets in these cameras, amazing. I have found, so here is the response that I would give you kind of in general, Xavier, about Olympus lenses, because the one thing I find in the Micro Four Thirds world, which is very refreshing. So for all the rest of you Canon, Nikon, Sony users, Fuji users, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be snipey here, but just saying it like it is. Micro Four Thirds users are the most laid back, welcoming, non-argumentative, don't always have to be right photographers I have come across in all of this educational journey that I do. Okay. I find that, you know, the Sony people, the Nikon, the Canon people, they're much more combative and, you know, my camera's the right camera, and it's the best, and all this stuff, okay? And, you know, and I get it. Don't get me wrong. Like, you invest a lot of money in your gear. You want to feel that it's the best, and you invest it because you believe it's the best, period. But there's just something about Micro Four Thirds. People are much more laid back. They're much more accepting, and they're really much more into having fun. Now, to be fair, have I come across Micro Four Thirds people that are also pixel peepers and are also like splitting hairs over all the specs on every little piece of equipment? Sure, there are. There are geartographers in every brand, right? There just are. So all of that being said, I have yet, in my experience, to find an Olympus M Zuiko lens that I have been unhappy with. But the full disclosure, you guys know, I'm not a pixel peeper. You know, I don't get all hung up on, you know, what are the bench test results on lenses and all that kind of stuff. So all of my statements about the quality of gear and what it produces are based on my eyes and what I see and what my experience is. So my experience has been great with all of them, Xavier. So I hope that helps. So, and he's asking me what I consider tweaking my camera settings to achieve a certain look, i.e. like private usage or skipping the raw process. No, I wouldn't do that so much in camera. I think I would do that more with post settings, because you can create presets of your own, whether you do it through actions or whether you do it through presets in Camera Raw or the develop panel, right, in Lightroom. So I don't know that I would bother going to that much trouble in camera, but I would certainly be willing to do it in post if there was something you know, that I needed. So so let's see here. And, oh, Sven, actually, and that's a very good point. Not a question, but a thing he learned today, because Sven is in the process of moving to Olympus. He realized that the mirrorless lenses use built-in lens profiles, which is also kind of really nice. So, yeah, when you're setting your lens profiles in Photoshop, Lightroom, etc., yeah, you know, it's built into the lens. So, Kat, if possible, I'd like to see you use the 12-100 at some point. I don't know that you'll see me use it, only because I don't have a need. I have all these other lenses, but everything I've read about it, everything I've heard about it, it's an awesome lens. And I think that where I would potentially consider using that lens would be if I was going to go on a vacation and really, really, really wanted to trim down to super lightweight, super small gear, because that 12-100 is really tiny. That's where I would definitely consider you know, maybe picking up that lens for, you know, if I was going to do a long-term trip, you know, that kind of stuff. So, Dan has the EM1 Mark 1, and he's switching to the Mark II. You're going to love the Mark II, man. Not that the Mark 1's bad, but, and he's looking at adding the Panasonic 100 to 400 for birds and aircraft. You know, everything I've heard, that Panasonic's a good lens. Again, I'm hardcore, and this is not because of anything that I've got going on with Olympus or anything. Guys, I was the same way with Nikon, except for the Tokina lens, right? You know, I only used Nikon lenses. That Tokina was a very rare anomaly for me, okay? So that being said, I'm the same way with Olympus. I'm only using M Zuiko lenses. I would not consider the Panasonic lens. I do have the 40-150, which gets me up to a 300 millimeter equivalent. And then I also have the Olympus M Zuiko 300 F4 Pro, and I have the teleconverter. So that gets me up to an 840 millimeter equivalent, which is more than adequate for me, okay? I would rather do it that way than go with the other brand. Not that that's a horrible idea. Let's be really clear. The great thing about Micro Four Thirds is that these companies work together on, you know, specifications for lens mounts, etc. But you know, but for me, I tend to stick with, you know, with the gear that's engineered, you know, for it. So let's see here. Scrolling back up, I want to make sure that I get some of these other ones that were up here. Here we are. So here's Timothy's follow-up. He was asking about you know, doing the JPEG stuff here. So the client sees the JPEG and then I edit in RAW. Just wondering, but as you explained it, it would be different for every shot. Not to worry, I'll shoot RAW only and not show the JPEGs anymore. Yeah, I mean, you know, Timothy, here's the one thing. Like, if you've got, it sounds like you've got kind of a specific need based on a certain workflow that you have to do with a client, in which case, you're not wrong doing what you're doing. That's fine. And then my suggestion would work for you. If you want to be able to make sure that they look the same, basically shoot one of each and then, create your own preset in RAW in the develop panel in Lightroom or the Camera Raw plugin so you have it matching the JPEG and boom, then you're good to go, right? That would totally work. The idea that you always have to shoot RAW, always have to shoot JPEG, or always have to do this, or always have to do that, that's like baloney. That there is no such thing. You just don't, okay? I talked about this a few weeks ago. I was a very late adopter to shooting RAW files. So I got my first, professional digital camera in the year 2000, the Nikon D1, all 2.7 megapixels, a whopping 2.7 megapixels. Pictures that wound up on billboards, by the way, okay? I shot JPEGs. In fact, I shot JPEGs all the way up until just about 2012, if I'm not mistaken, right? 2011, 2012. And it was at that point that I started shooting some RAW. And it wasn't until about 2014 that I shot RAW exclusively. Now, here's the thing about that. I'm actually really glad that I did that. And the reason I'm glad is because shooting JPEGs exclusively, it forced me to get it right in camera when it comes to exposure. I never relied on dynamic range. Never. What that did for me then when I went to RAW, my techniques, my exposure techniques, everything are much, much more refined. So you hear so many new and young photographers. You see so many new young YouTubers talking about how important dynamic range is because you've got 13 stops. And basically what they're saying is you've got 13 stops to screw up your exposure and still be able to fix it later. That's not the way to make consistently great photographs. It's just not. So that's why, when we talk about dynamic range, as far as I'm concerned, is a moot point because every camera on the market today has got more than ample dynamic range if you are doing good photography, period. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't care about what you're doing, you want to be lazy, you want to be sloppy, yes, then buy the most dynamic range that you can find. But if you're really interested in learning photography and taking great pictures, you don't need a lot of dynamic range. You just don't. Okay? So, let's see here. Vinay, recently started working with lighting and you do much on-site lighting. So how much light and which light do you carry for on-site shoots? Vinay, that depends on the shoot. I mean, literally, I'm not trying to be vague. It depends on the shoot. I've been known to go out with just one speed light and I've been known to go out with like 15 cases of, gear with lights and modifiers and cords and stands and, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it really depends on what I'm shooting and what my needs are for that specific shot. So I don't have kind of a one size fits all, setup. So, let's see here. Where are we at? Make sure I didn't miss any here. Let's see. Patrick, what is the essential equipment to start a home studio for someone who is on a budget? Wow. Patrick, even there, that's one of those questions. It's very hard for me to give you a concise answer because number one, it depends on exactly what you want to shoot. So you say a home studio, so I'm going to assume you're doing portraits, right? Well, you can do really nice portraits with one light. You can do even nicer portraits with one light and a shoot-through umbrella. You can do even nicer portraits with one light, a shoot-through umbrella, and a reflector. So just working in that setup, that means you need a stand, you need a flash, or an LED light, a bright one. You need a trigger if you're using the flash, remote control, okay? And then you're going to add an umbrella, shoot-through umbrella. Then you're going to add a reflector, which could be a dollar store, $1 reflector, like my Walmart reflectors. I can't call them Walmart reflectors anymore because Walmart doesn't sell them anymore, okay? So, but, $1 for a reflector. You might want to have another stand to put that reflector on, and then you need a reflector holder, which you can buy, or you can do one of the DIY reflector holders that I showed on my channel, right? So all those are options. Here's what I would encourage you, though, to do, Patrick, okay? And that is, and it was Patrick, right? Yeah, it was. Okay, so do your research on your lighting, Patrick, in terms of what kind of light you want to use. And decide I want to use pocket flashes like the Godox 8200, or I want to use studio strobes like the Interfit Honey Badgers, both lights that I would recommend, okay? Once you've decided on what lights you want to use, then what you do, and all this is on paper, by the way, then what you're going to do is you're going to kind of spec out your perfect, ideal lighting system, right? How many lights do you need? How many stands do you need? How many modifiers? What kind? What size? All that. Spec it out on paper. Then the depressing part is in the last column, you put in the amounts and you total all up. That's the depressing part. So we won't dwell on that. But then what you do, since you're just learning, is you kind of set that aside and you go buy one of the lights and one of the stands. That's it. And start using it. Practice with it. Master it. Get to the point where you are bored with it, but that you are able to use it to take consistently good pictures. Then add a reflector. Just the reflector for $1. Maybe get a stand, maybe get a holder, or make a holder like my DIY one for that. Then get a shoot-through umbrella. Each time, use them until you've mastered them, until you're completely bored to death with what you're doing because you've mastered it. Then you're going to go ahead and you're going to add another light, another stand, and so on. And you keep building out your system that way. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to start off and just kind of randomly start, adding pieces in. What I would encourage you to do, Patrick, let me go back to my YouTube channel here really quick. When you get to my YouTube channel, scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page. And there it is, the very last video on the page, all right? Home photography studio on a budget. Now, a lot of people would argue your home photography studio is cooler than a lot of like big studios. It is kind of. But there's a lot of really, really good tips in there in terms of like gadgets and gear and things that are going to help you make your job easier. So, I would encourage you, make sure you watch that one. And then the other thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go back up through my DIY videos, okay? And you're going to find a lot of good stuff in there as far as making background stands, making reflector holders, even more recently under gear, the photo clamps, all that kind of stuff. In fact, I have a video coming out next week. It's all about Justin clamps, and I'm going to show you guys a DIY version of a Justin clamp that is super easy to make. It's half the price, actually less than half the price of buying an off-the-shelf Justin clamp. And for anybody that's going to do any kind of location lighting, these are great in the studio as well, but if you're doing any kind of location work, I would encourage you to own a minimum of 2 Justin clamps. So I'm going to show you how you can make them and make them at a fraction of the cost. So that'll be coming up next week. So hopefully that helps you out there a little bit, Patrick. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Let's see. Alexander, you're looking for my Facebook group. It's still there, man. Let me give you the link here. I will put it in the chat window. There you go. It's there. It's got a new name, but the group is still there. It's called TogChat with Joe Edelman. It's an extension of what we do here on TogChat, but there's the group, as a matter of fact. There it is. So you can see it. I put the link in there. If you haven't joined, please do. We would love to have you, okay? Once you join, make sure that you watch this video. Super, super important. And make sure, let's get the rest of that information there. Make sure you read all the rules. Yeah, it's kind of long, all right? And then linked in there is also another video that's about giving constructive criticism. So definitely make sure that you watch those 2 videos, but we would love to have you in the group, okay? All right, so let's see here. Adam, thinking about getting an Olympus OM1 film camera for kicks and giggles. Any other recommendations for a budget manual film camera that you can think of that I can check out? Honestly, Adam, I don't know. Film is a 4-letter word, and my mother taught me never to use 4-letter words, so I'm okay not shooting film. I'm glad I did, but yeah, I'm okay with not shooting film at this point. So unfortunately, I wouldn't be a big help there. Sorry. So I would say that if you're already an Olympus user and you've got Olympus lenses, definitely go with an Olympus film camera because things are going to change, right? Okay. So let's say Vinay, how can you sync multiple lights with a single pair trigger receiver? So I won't make a video on that, Vinay, and the reason being there's like basically depending on the brand you buy triggers that go with it, or you can get generic triggers like Neewer or that type of thing. I have information about that in the flash videos that are on my YouTube channel. If you go to the videos that I talk about flash, I talk about the different types of triggers. But there are so many different brands and so many different variations. It's not something that I am likely to do a video on it at any point in time. And again, I need you guys to understand, it's just so you don't miss. I appreciate it. It's like, hey, could you do a video on this? Hey, could you do a video on that? I hate when people ask me that question. And I know you mean well. So let me explain, okay? Please don't think I'm being a jerk. That is not my goal. I hate when people ask me that question for two reasons. Number one, they're frequently being lazy. Good photography, great photography, is the act of solving problems, not having somebody make a video that shows you how to do it, right? So videos can be very helpful, but if you watch the openings of my videos, what does it tell you? It's all about learning the hows and whys. My goal is to share with you the way I think, the way that I've learned, the way that I do things. If I do all the thinking for you, you're never going to learn photography, right? So there comes a point where, unfortunately, you got to stop watching videos. I love that you guys watch my videos. I appreciate it, but my videos are not going to make you photographers. They're not. You're going to make yourselves photographers. Nobody can do that for you. So, and then the other reason why I don't like that question is that frequently when people are asking me that question, they're asking me to make a video about gear. Earlier tonight, somebody said, hey, you know, can you talk about the 12 to 100? I hope you'll do that down the road. I don't do gear videos, right? So just, you know, kind of not my thing. All right. So, Clint James chiming in here with a very good reminder, Clint. When you answer or when you go to join the group, you're going to be asked 3 really, really simple questions. Make sure you answer the questions. Otherwise, you do not get accepted into the group. Okay. It is a requirement for entry into the group. The first question is your credit card number. The second one is bank account information. And I think the third one includes your address and social security number so we can use that first information. No, I'm kidding, okay? But it basically is a commitment that you are going to take the time to watch the video and follow the group rules. My group is very different, and it works very differently than most Facebook photography groups, and that is extremely intentional. It's actually a lot of work to participate in my group. Anybody can join the group and lurk. And believe me, we have probably 9 times more lurkers than we do participants, and that's actually great. So, you know, actually participating in the group, it does take quite a bit of work to participate. So it's important that you do answer those questions and then, of course, follow through by watching the video. So, Clint, thank you for that reminder. Okay. So, all right, let's get back up here. I know I missed a bunch of questions. Let's see. Aaron Edwards, what are my views on the Godox 8200? Well, so not to, you know, go back through all this because I know a lot of people here have heard those views. It's great flash. I own 4 of them. I didn't start out thinking that way. In fact, when I got my first one, I actually here on TogChat said some not great things about it, but it was kind of my fault. And what I mean by that is, in all fairness, I had not really done my research on the flash. I purchased it because tons of people have been talking about it. Tons of people were using it. And I thought, you know what? I was looking at doing a series of comparison videos with lights. And I thought, let me pick one of these up because they look really interesting. The fact that it's like a speed light, but yet it works like a studio strobe and it's 3 times more powerful than a speed light. It's like, cool. So, and that's about all the research I did, like literally. So when it arrived and I opened it, I was shocked at how heavy it is because they are heavy. I expected it, since it looks like a speed light, I expected it to weigh like a speed light. No, it's like a brick. The way you mount it, you can't mount it like a speed light. You mount it, you know, by 1/4-20 threads, either on the side or the bottom. Not the end of the world, but again, you know, that also meant that I had certain modifiers that the 8200 would not work in because they were designed for speed lights. And unless you were going to basically hack the setup, it's not designed to fit in those modifiers. So it was really kind of on me. I had not done enough research. My go-to flash is still a studio strobe. It's still the Interfit Honey Badgers. Love them. That's what I use for the overwhelming majority of my work. But like tomorrow morning, I am going to be in an airplane headed to Fort Worth, Texas, and I will be traveling with the Godox 8200s and actually 2 small little Godox speed lights that I'll be using in my talk as well. And you know, they're great. I've been very, very, very pleased with them. Very pleased with them. So, if I was not primarily a studio shooter and if I did more location work than I did studio work, I would definitely, the 8200 would be kind of my go-to. But given that I primarily do studio work, the Interfit definitely still holds that, holds that title. So, Xavier, is the video series about light modifiers already out? No, that's not going to be out until June. It's in the works. We are talking an insane amount of work going into this. In fact, in order to be able to do the comparison photos, I actually am using space in a theater to be able to set up the shots, to be able to do the comparison photos, because my studio is simply not big enough to be able to do the comparisons with all the modifiers. But I'm about a third of the way through all the production on it. Got probably another 2 days worth of shooting to finish all of the stills and the B-roll that go with it. That'll happen within the next 2 weeks. And then after that, it's a matter of writing the scripts and doing the editing. But I've got 48 different modifiers that we are doing comparisons on, from speedlights all the way up through studio strobes. So there's going to be quite a bit of information in there, okay? And the worst part of it is I'll tell all of you right now, all it's going to do is set off a big debate, because the people that like this, the people that like this, and they're not going to give up on that. And for the people that want somebody to say, this is the best modifier to own, it's just going to confuse the living bejesus out of you. And actually, that's my goal, is to try and get people to stop stressing about modifiers and forget the damn modifier and go and learn the inverse square law. Because part of what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how these really ridiculously expensive modifiers and really ridiculously big ones don't do any better than the cheap small ones, and vice versa. Okay, so, and again, it all comes back to the inverse square law. Probably one of the most valuable videos about lighting that I ever made was that video where I showed you how to do beauty dish lighting with a $6 shoot-through umbrella. You can't prove the point any better than that. There's no, it's not like I'm some magician. There was no tricks there. It's simply using the physics, the inverse square law, and solving the problem. So it's going to, it's going to confuse a lot of people more than it's going to help them, unfortunately, because a lot of people just want a simple answer, and there is no simple answer. A lot of what's the best modifier and why do you use it simply has to do with your own personal taste, and that's fine. It's completely fine. So, but we are going to break it down. I'm going to try and dispel some myths and common misconceptions, and really kind of get a little bit closer to, what was intended when these different modifiers were designed, and what are they going to do for you, and where and when would you best use them in that sense. Okay, so Julie really wanted to go to Fort Worth to see you, but you realized you had 2 shoots. Well, since you have 2 shoots, you're forgiven. I am bummed that I'm not going to get to meet you, but that's a really, really good reason not to make it. I will tell you this, though, if you do have time over the course of the next 2 weeks. In fact, here, let me bring it up on the screen. This Fort Worth Photo Fest is like really, really cool stuff. So this is my first year down there. In fact, here, I'll put the link in the chat window for you guys, for any of you that are in Texas or able to travel to Texas. So you can see here this crazy guy, Joe Edelman. I'm opening up. I'm one of the first talks that's happening, which is Friday afternoon. They've got a lot of field trips. In fact, Friday night, we're going to Billy Bob's Bull Riding, which is going to be really, really cool. And Kedron, another one of our YouTube guys, is going to be doing a retouching thing on Saturday. There's a big Edelman demo also on Saturday. And then as the week goes on, they've got models coming in. They're going to do roller skating and roller boogie, aerial photography, and there's some drone stuff, pet photography. There's a lot of field trips, an evening at the Modern, a whole thing on Adobe Lightroom. There's photo walks. Thing at the Water Gardens, skate shoots, a trip to the zoo, concert photography. There's stuff about copyright law. And then I know all the way down here at the bottom. I mean, look at this stuff. This is like 2 weeks of just nonstop, crazy cool photography stuff. For all you Olympus shooters, Olympus Visionary, Tracy McGlosky is going to be there on May 19th. So I'm kind of doing the opening weekend for Olympus. She's doing the closing weekend for Olympus. Olympus is one of the big sponsors of this event. But really, really cool stuff. So if you can't make it to my talk, that's a bummer. But there's a lot of other cool stuff there. So I would still encourage you, try and make it out to the Photo Fest. A lot of really, really, good stuff. So Adam Batchelor, are photographers getting ripped off by those brown color modifiers? Hell yeah, man. Yeah. That's why those strip lights, those strip light modifiers that I made, Broncolor puts out one called the pipe light, which is basically the same thing, except it's like a couple grand. It's like ridiculous. Like, so yeah. Ishmael, no zombie photographer questions. Thank you so much for the super chat, man. Really, really appreciate it. So, let's hear. Danae, I saw there was a way to subscribe for a membership for a monthly fee to see your full edited transformation, including some Photoshop videos. Where do you go? Oh, that's Danae. That is Patreon, which the link is in the description right below the video, or you go to patreon.com/Joe Edelman, and I'll get you that link here, and I will put it in the chat window. And I'll tell you honestly, the coolest thing about Patreon, which I think I know some of my patrons are here, so I'll let them speak for themselves, but our Friday night Zoom chats on Patreon, where basically we use the Zoom room technology, and everybody, you know, logs in with their webcams and, you know, their microphones, and basically for, well, it's supposed to be an hour. It usually winds up being an hour and a half or 2 hours, because shocker, I never get done in an hour. We spend, you know, Friday evenings just talking photography, and some weeks we'll be helping a photographer that's got a shoot come up, kind of plan their lighting and plan what they're going to do. Other weeks we're kind of reviewing stuff that somebody just did. So yeah, I mean, it's actually a lot of fun, and it's a little bit different every week. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. Okay, all right. So let's see here. Scrolling back up. Let's see. Pateo, how do you manage your rechargeable batteries in terms of how long you use them before recharging, etc.? You know, I am horrible at rechargeable battery management. I'm not gonna lie. I know some photographers that are, you know, very diligent, even keep little notes, or they use like color-coded tags, all that kind of stuff. I'm horrible at it. I just have tons of batteries, so I tend to go the route of, and this is a horrible suggestion, okay? Like, I'm owning it. So don't do what I'm doing, right? You know, if I pick up a battery and it's not working, it's like, okay, stick it in the charger and then grab another one that is. Now, like, for instance, I'm going to be traveling, like I'm leaving at like 5 a.m. in the morning to go to the airport, and then I've got 2 days of shooting in Fort Worth. So today, all the gear that's going that needs batteries, I made sure that batteries got charged up, you know, so that I have ample batteries plus spares for the trip. And I'll be taking chargers for the strobe batteries, chargers for the camera batteries, just in case, which means, you know, I'm never going to have to charge anything because I've got plenty of spares. But so in a scenario like this, where, you know, I know I'm going to go away for 2 days, I'm not really going to have time to play around with batteries and all that, I will go ahead and make sure that I have a group of batteries charged up and ready to go. Beyond that, I am horrible at keeping up with battery charging. It's kind of like, oh yeah, that battery's almost dead, put it in the charger now and find one that's more charged. Not the ideal way to do it. You know, everybody's got their strengths and weaknesses, and I am usually OCD about my gear and how I manage it and all that kind of stuff. Rechargeable batteries are like my Achilles heel. It's like the one thing in my head. I just never get organized with it. Not proud of that. Definitely would not recommend following that methodology. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it, unfortunately. So, all right. Damn, buy a car charger. Yeah, that's definitely an option. So, no, Eric, I didn't miss yours. So here, let's get Eric's. Eric was in early, and I skipped over his questions here because I wanted to make sure I didn't get too far behind. So, Eric had 2 questions for me. They're both good questions, so let's do them both. The first one is, he's looking to get a solid color background for his portable stands. He knows that I say that gray is the best, but if space is limited, should he get black and just increase the power of the speed lights? I wouldn't. No, I would still go with gray. Maybe go with a darker gray, but I would go with gray. The reason I say that is, if you need to lighten up that black background, it's going to be really hard to do it evenly. So, you know, if you're going to light it with like a glow, like a vignette where it's like light in the bottom and then it fades off to black, that's easy to do. But if you want to lighten that up and then, you know, make it white or gray, that's going to be a lot of work. So honestly, I would still go with a gray or maybe a dark gray if you're thinking you need, you know, if you need darker stuff. Okay. And then the other question Eric had is, Does a MagMod system work lighting the background when using umbrellas to light your subject? Should I get 2 to evenly color the background or stick with 1 and have a gradient? So by the time I got to this question, Eric, it became really evident that you're very new to lighting. The fact that you're using an umbrella to light your subject means nothing in terms of making a decision to use a MagMod to light a background. So the better question for me to ask you would be more along the lines of, why do you want to use a MagMod to light your background? Could you? Sure. Heck, you could use the MagMod to light your subject. I've done that in my videos. So, you know, I think that you're kind of grasping it like, oh, here's these different tools. They look cool, and this is what people use it for. That's what I should do, right? If I had to choose and I had the money, do I use an umbrella to light my portrait subject? That's my key light. Or do I use a MagMod? No, I definitely use an umbrella. Okay. Could I do with the MagMod? Yes, but the umbrella is going to be better and it'll be cheaper than the MagMod. As far as lighting a background goes with a MagMod, I don't know that I would need or think about using the MagMod to light a background. I would probably just use a direct flash, but there's literally a million variables depending upon, like, you know, how much ambient light is in the room, how close is your subject to the background, how many lights do you have to work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, before you start spending that kind of money, MagMods are awesome. Let's be really clear. MagMods are awesome. You can use MagMods in studio scenarios, but do understand MagMods are designed more for location lighting, right? I mean, that's how they were conceived. So I want to be clear, you could use them for anything. I've used them in the studio in my videos, okay? But I don't know that I would be purchasing a MagMod for studio purposes. I think that there are better ways to do it. Yeah, Eric, the MagMod isn't necessarily going to stop light spill. Again, it depends on, you know, difference. The way you stop light spill is with a flag. That's something that's black and opaque, okay? So the problem of it is you're not really understanding how light travels, and you're clearly not understanding the inverse square law. So I'm going to be really straight with you. You're really kind of foolish if you buy an umbrella or a MagMod before you take the time to learn those. You should go back to my YouTube channel, and let's flip over the screen here. We'll flip that over. Go back to the YouTube channel and click on the little magnifying glass and type in inverse square and hit search. And should be the first video that comes up. There it is with the eggs, the inverse square law. What's the big deal? And then, Eric, watch this one. This is what I was talking about just a few minutes ago, how I created Beauty Dish lighting with a $7 shoot-through umbrella, okay? If you can honestly say that you understand the content of those videos, then you're not going to be asking me the same questions that you're asking me. You're going to be asking me very, very different questions. So that's why I would encourage you, before you spend the money, you know, watch those. You sound like you're kind of gung-ho and ready to give it a try, and that's cool. But you're asking questions that lead me to believe you're going to throw away money because you're not really going to get out of that gear what you want it to do for you. And that would be a shame, because, you know, MagMod's great, but I don't think you're trying to use it in the most ideal of ways. Okay? All right. Brent, I've been doing a bit of bird and wildlife photography recently. Often find that I'm photographing a squirrel, for example, in a tree, on limbs and such. Often there's a lot of natural backlight. So, and I'm still waiting for the rest of it. I should have waited. Sorry. So when we get the rest of Brent's question, I'll go back and I'll answer that. So let's see. Xavier, I tried to research alternatives to high-speed sync and found super sync. And with ND filter is the more if I want to fill shadows with higher shutter speeds or against the sun to get rim lights from it. Xavier, I'm sorry, I'm not entirely understanding what your question is there. If you can maybe like rephrase it or give me a little bit, you know, more information. So, DMAC, you'll be working with JP Morgan here in Houston. Good for you, man. That's great. Is he doing a workshop there? So. I've never met him. I've seen him like in person, but I've never actually met him. But great guy, knows his stuff. I saw that you asked earlier, DMAC, can I make it to Houston? I have a simple rule. Pay my way, I'm there. So sure, if somebody wants to hire me to come to Houston, I would love to come to Houston. So pretty much that's me. Have camera, will travel, right? So yeah, Eric, but you have to understand, spill from the so Eric's saying here, spill from the umbrella to the background. You're not great at explaining. No, Eric, look, man, I'm not trying to be a jerk. You're not understanding. If you're using an umbrella for your key light, that light is not spilling onto the background unless you've got your subject sitting dead up tight against the background. You're not understanding the inverse square law, okay? So you need to go back and you need to understand those pieces, because every little piece you're adding, Eric, unfortunately, you're demonstrating how much you don't understand lighting. All I'm trying to do is I'm trying to save you money. You want an easy answer. You clearly want an easy answer. And you're looking at really expensive stuff. I love mag mods. Let's be clear, folks. Don't walk away and say, oh, Edelman says mag mods suck. No, mag mods are awesome. Love them. But a mag mod is not the solution that you're talking about. And the way you're trying to use it, it's not going to do what you're thinking it's going to do. That's my point. So you really got to go back and you've got to get the basics in play, okay? You know, Eric, you would be a perfect candidate for Patreon in terms of, you know, being able to have more time, or certainly you could do a one-on-one consultation with me or a one-on-one workshop. And a lot of you folks may not realize that I do that, but if you go to my website and you click on the lectures and workshops tab, well, two things, just since you're here, let me show you guys. If you click on lectures and workshops, you can see my teaching schedule as it's coming up over the next couple of months. So, you know, I'm going to be in Fort Worth the next 2 days. Tomorrow night, you can come have beer and tacos and shoot models with me at Taco Heads in downtown Fort Worth, which will be a lot of fun. And then Friday, I'll be doing my talk at Fort Worth Photo Fest. Next month, I'm going to be out of Chicago. In fact, I need to update this week so that it has the actual dates and times. These are the actual dates, sorry, but it has the actual times of my talks, and we're doing a photo walk. Also, your buddy Manny Ortiz and myself, we're going to be doing a photo walk as part of Out of Chicago, which will be really cool. Then some Camera Club talks coming up. In November, I'll be doing the Horizon Photography Summit. Also, in October, I will be speaking at Photo Plus, probably for Olympus. Haven't signed the contracts yet, but I think that's going to happen. So yeah, so that's the first thing. But the second thing is I do one-on-one workshops here in my studio in Allentown. So if you want to come here and spend a day with me one-on-one, you can do that. The information is there. And I also do video consultations where basically we log on via webcam and we can talk about anything from business consulting to specific issues you're having with lighting, all that kind of stuff. So I've got all kind of tools set up that I'm able to do demos for you, watch you work in your studio, allow you to watch what I'm doing here, all that kind of stuff. So all of those are options. Okay. All right. So let's see here. Going back to our questions now. Let's see here. DMAC, well, can't afford you now. JP's doing his shoot. I'll be assisting him. He's helping. That's good, man. Cool. Good for you. Very good. Cat Panda, when you win the lottery, invite me over to Sweden. I would love to come to Sweden. Believe me. The part of the challenge was with the overseas stuff. So I am hoping, one of my goals, I really wanted to make it, I was bummed because I wanted to make it to the photo show in the UK this year. Didn't quite work out. So I'm really pushing to make that happen next year. The challenge with a lot of the overseas events is that because of tax laws in different countries and that, companies, it's not easy for companies to basically pay you to come and speak overseas. So there's kind of a lot of backwards ways you kind of work things out and get it done. So trying to get that set up for next year, but that's a show that I really like to. I'd love to go to Photokina. I don't think it's going to happen this year. I've never been, but yeah, trust me, I'm looking forward to getting out there and doing some more global things. So Charlie, do I mount my photos for display? Can you talk about the method used? I rarely print at this point, Charlie, and I'm actually great with that. I actually haven't printed anything in probably about 3 years. In fact, the folks at Olympus have asked if I would put together a photo album, like a really high-end photo album that they are going to duplicate for their sales team, so that their salesmen can basically walk into stores and the smaller events that Olympus does and show off like actual pictures that are taken with Olympus cameras, and myself and quite a few of the Olympus visionaries are doing a similar thing. So I've been kind of stressing because I've got to get myself back up to speed on printing. I literally have not printed in several years. So I'm not even going to try and go down the path of like mount it this way or that way, only because, Charlie, I know that from the last time that I did any framing, there's been a lot of new technology and things that have come up with terms of like best practices and ways to do mounting and that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, I'm not the guy to give you that information. I'm sorry. So let's see. Aaron Edwards, which photographer, if any, did I look up to get inspiration from when I was starting out? There were a few, Aaron. I've talked about them before. So probably one of the first ones, they had nothing in it. So when I say starting out now, you know, I'm talking when I was a teenager, 13, 14, 15 years old. People like Elliot Erwitt, who were doing, you know, really incredible artsy things. Peter Turner, probably one of my most favorite for the color that he used. Once I discovered girls, Peter Galland, hands down, like the guy who defined and created the genre glamour the glamour genre that we know today, and that unfortunately is abused today. But his work was just amazing. As I got a little bit older, on the photojournalism side, one of my greatest idols, who is a man who's still alive today and still very active as a photographer. In fact, he's really actually a historical icon, and that is David Hume Kennerly. David Hume Kennerly was a Pulitzer Prize winner at age 23. He was the official White House photographer for President Gerald R. Ford, and he has photographed more presidents than any other photographer in history. And he's still alive and kicking and still working today. In fact, several of the more famous portraits of President Donald Trump were shot by David Hume Kennerly. So on the fashion side, when I was younger, a photographer who I believe is no longer alive, but I think it was for 17 years. Well, I don't know why that number's sticking in my head, so I may be wrong. Don't quote me, but I believe it was about 17 years. He was the only photographer to ever shoot the covers of Cosmopolitan magazine. His name was Francesco Scavullo. Absolutely loved his work. So yeah, those would be kind of my early inspirations in that sense. Danae, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the super chat. Thank you. So Charles, my website is not Android browsers friendly. Interesting. Haven't heard that before, but I could make an Android joke. I'll try not to. But I'll look into that. Okay. So let's see here. Scrolling back up. Actually, I had a couple of the questions from earlier on. Let me try and get these out here. Let's see. Roy asked a question. How about a contrast, possibly a video with examples, between headshots and portraits? In today's world, Roy, they're the same thing. They really are. The definitions are very loose. You know, you're looking for rules. I don't like rules. So a portrait can be anything from the bust up, very traditional, very formal, or a portrait could be, you know, head and shoulders, really tight, like a headshot, and vice versa. So you're going to find, if you were like to Google search those two words and then click on the image tabs, you're going to find thousands of variations of both, and then you'll notice that they all overlap. They're very, very similar. So you know, if you're looking for guidelines, I would tend to say that a portrait is a little bit more formal, a headshot is a little bit more casual, but even that, you're going to be able to find tons of examples otherwise, you know, in that sense. But in terms of the origins, portraits were formal and traditional. Headshots were something that models and actors used. But at this point, you know, people refer to social media images as headshots, all that kind of stuff. So it really kind of overlaps. And because of things like social media and that, and the internet, what is appropriate for a portrait is changing. It's evolving, right? Because a traditional portrait, you know, would generally be from about the bust up. It would have space along the sides. So to do a shot like that for a social media portrait, you're basically making an extremely ineffective portrait. So, you know, that's the thing. So, Adam Patchell, Trump's photographer, needs some tuition. Well, we're not going to go down any political stuff. So be clear, the photographer I'm talking about, David Hume Kennerly, he is not the White House photographer today. And I feel very, very bad, actually, that I do not know the young woman's name, but it's a woman that is Trump's personal photographer. So David Hume Kennerly, actually, he freelances today, and he is also partially employed by CNN for doing certain work. But he's not part of the Trump White House. So, Cat Panda, you say it does work on Android. Yeah, I thought it worked on Android too. This is the first I've ever heard somebody tell me it doesn't work on Android. And the site gets quite a bit of traffic, so I have a feeling I would have heard by now. But I will look into it, Charles. I promise you. So. Let's see what other questions that I have back here. George A asked, do I keep spare flash bulbs for my strobes? He has strobes that are already discontinued. What should he do if one of the bulbs breaks? Buy new strobes. Yep. I mean, if the company doesn't sell them at all, then yeah, I mean, that would be the issue. Charles, you're saying that Chrome is struggling to load it on Android. So that's not an Android issue. That's a Chrome issue on your Android. The site's operating all by best practices, so unfortunately you've got kind of a one-off situation there, but I assure you the site does work on Android. Okay. So George, back to your bulbs. Yeah, I mean, if you maybe you can hit eBay up or something like that, and on eBay find some people that have some older ones that aren't working but the bulbs are still good. But yeah, if you can't find a replacement bulb, you pretty much got to buy a new strobe. That's like your only other option. So I'm not really sure what other suggestions I could make for you there. So Al B had a question earlier on. This is a good one that people run into a lot. So he's doing a set of corporate portraits, and the client wants a consistent look, but there is a lot of diversity in the group, both in terms of gender, physical attributes, complexion, etc. Do you give up the consistency for the best individual portraits? Flattering on one, not for others. What do you do? So Albie, if the client is saying we need like consistent background, consistent lighting, that's what you do. Done, hands down. It's not even a debate. You work within those boundaries, solve problems. So it's not going to be a perfect solution for every subject that comes into play, but at the same time, the client is probably not looking for like a masterpiece portrait of every person. They want something that's standardized because it's got to fit marketing material. Usually stuff like that, it's going to go on the about page of a website, or it's going to go in some kind of a brochure. So yeah, if the client's saying they need a consistent look, you do a consistent look. That's it. So, and then you work within that to do the best you can to make everyone look their best. Okay. So yeah, that would definitely be my answer there. Okay. All right, so let's see here. Ajax, on average, how many shots do you go through before during a portrait shoot, and how many keepers do you get? You average 300 and generally only have about 5 keepers. So that's 4 more keepers than I keep. If I'm doing a portrait, I'm looking for 1, right? A portrait is single, not plural, right? So yeah, I mean that's right about where I would be. And in terms of, I don't know that I would call them keepers so much, just in terms of what I'm looking to work with, etc. But yeah, kind of per pose on a portrait, I'm going to shoot between 150, 200 frames or so, and I'm going to do several different poses, so it's going to add up from there. So so Brent says the rest of his went by. Let me see if I can find the rest of his, because I started his. Let's see. Okay, so the first part of Brent's question, he's been doing a bit of bird and wildlife photography recently. Often he finds that he's photographing a squirrel, for example, on a tree limb and such. Often there's a lot of natural backlight, so he stops down and he uses some flash. And long, is there a good ratio to set your flash power to on the fly relative to your aperture? No, Brent. It really depends on how much do you want the light from your flash to actually be lighting the subject. In other words, are you using it for fill? Are you using it for not? And even to say, well, I'm using it for fill, there's still not like a set ratio in that sense, because it all depends on what's your taste. So yeah, I mean, I don't really have a specific number that I could give you that I think would be helpful. I would anticipate that you're dealing with a fair amount of distance. So it's also going to depend on, what are the power capabilities of your strobe? Can your strobe really deliver, at a distance, etc. So that's going to be the other challenge that you run into there. So, so let's see here. I know Xavier's been having all kind of problems with autocorrect. Let's see here. Is there an alternative to high-speed sync except for super sync or using a neutral density filter to fill shadows when wanting a rim light from the sun? Sure, put your subject in the shade and back them up right to the edge where the sun is just hitting the rim. Yeah, I mean, I have a video where I talk about that. The video where I talk about shooting portraits outdoors in bright sunlight, I actually do that. So I hope that answers your question, because I know you're having a hard time typing it in there, Xavier. But as I've explained many, many times before in here, I don't use high-speed sync. I think it's pointless. You remember, we overpowered the sun, and we shot at wide apertures in the 1970s when there was no high-speed sync, right? So high-speed sync is just a convenience feature. So, not that it's bad. I'm not saying I don't, people think I hate high-speed sync. No. I hate the fact that people spend extra money to get high-speed sync when they don't really understand how to make it work. They understand how to turn the high-speed sync on and do what you're supposed to do, but they don't get great results with it because they're not really understanding what the technique is and how to best achieve it. Or they're using it just to be a zombie and do what everybody else does. Boring. So, again, you got to go back to the basics and find ways to solve the problem first without it. And then you can use it as a convenience to make your life easier if it's something that you really need. But if you're doing it because everybody else does it, no. But to do what you're describing, for me, I would simply find shade, back the person up right to the edge of the shade so the sunlight's hitting the, the back of their head, creating the rim, and then I'm good to go. I got nice, soft, even light to work with. So that would be, that would be my approach to handling that. So, okay. So, DMAC, you solved your problem with the Tokina 100. Good. Glad to hear it. Very good. So, all right, gang. I think I am caught up here. If we are, we're going to say good night. I hope that I didn't miss anybody here. I think I got most everybody. I'm just scrolling through really quick just to see if there's anything that I missed. Let's see here. Let's see. Looks like we're all caught up. So let's just see what came in. Liquid Devo, do I? No, I don't have a video on high-speed sync because I don't use it, man. You don't need it. That's the point. Okay, it's a pointless feature. So no, I don't use it at all. Alexander, high-speed sync is not designed for stopping action. Let's be clear. High-speed sync is not meant to stop action, right? It's just not. So you guys need to go back and you need to understand how this stuff really works, all right? And believe me, it's not really meant for stopping action. That's not the way to do it. The way to photograph action is actually learn how to photograph action, period, okay? Any action, like a jumping person, since you mentioned a person jumping, there is always a peak to the action. And 99% of the time, that peak is also where the action looks the coolest and the best. So you learn to shoot action by learning about the action and anticipating it, capturing the moment. But high-speed sync is not really designed for shooting action. That's not the point, okay? So anyway, gang, I'm going to say, oh, wait a minute. There's one more here. Charles, in my opinion, is really using speedlights on camera with whatever modifier out there a deadly sin, something out of the question, except for photojournalists. So believe it or not, most photojournalists don't do flash on camera anymore either. But once again, it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish, Charles. It comes down to there is no one size fits all. So for me to say it's okay or it's bad would be wrong, because it's okay or it's bad depending on what you want to do and what you're trying to accomplish. So yeah, I mean, if you're shooting event work, you need to wander around a room and you want to use some bounce flash just for simple fill, but you're still using the ambient light, the on-camera flash bounce can be great. If you are trying to do portraits using on-camera flash, that's going to be a little rough. You know, so kind of depends on what exactly you're doing and you know what you're after. So Adam, do I use high speed sync? That's a joke, right? Okay. Airfan, what can we do to remove shadows under a subject in product photography? Most of the time I have very soft shadows under the product. Any tip? So you're asking the I shoot people photographer how to solve a product shot. Sure. What you do, depending on how big your product is you get a translucent base and you put a light underneath it. No shadows. Or you shoot with Olympus and you use live composite and then you paint it. Just like I do in the video that I did 3 weeks ago, about live composite. I did a little clip with an Olympus camera where I did a live composite of it. No shadows. So yeah, they will all work. So, okay. DMAC, hey, tell JP that he's welcome to my talk anytime. So he's probably done Fort Worth Photo Fest before. So, all right, gang. So it is time for me to say goodnight. I have to go finish packing. I have to be up at like 5 a.m. Actually, I have to leave the house at like 5 a.m. to get to the airport. So I've got a crazy early trip to the airport tomorrow, so that I get down to Fort Worth nice and early and get to the hotel and all that kind of stuff. So you guys need to get out. Make sure you're taking lots of pictures this weekend. Have a great weekend. I will be back next week. I've got that Justin Clint video coming the beginning of the week. TogChat next week. We'll be back with the interviews. I promise you, if it kills me, if I have to spend all the beginning of next week getting it set up, I've got these interviews lined up and I'm really excited to do them. So they are going to happen. We will catch up with Photo Joseph that we were going to talk with tonight. And for all of you that were disappointed with Ken, believe me, nobody was more disappointed about not getting to talk to Ken Wheeler than I was. It will be happening. You have my word. All right, gang. So as always, thank you again for spending the night with me. And please remember these words.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TogChat. Now go and pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot, it's your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.